Thanks again, everybody, for joining. If I haven't met you yet, my name is Kelly Mann, and I'm the Director of Programs with A Time to Heal. And we're very fortunate to have you guys here today. This is going to be a great discussion and a great topic to discuss with Dr. Deming. Joining us, we have Dr. Richard Deming. He is the Medical Director of Mercy Cancer Center in Des Moines, Iowa. He received his bachelor's degree at South Dakota State University and his medical degree at Creighton University. Dr. Deming is involved in many national, state, and community organizations and is the recipient of many awards. His greatest ambition is to encourage others to pursue lives of meaning, purpose, passion, and compassion. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Deming.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here. It is a great day to be alive. And I am just amazed that Pat and Maria are not on their bicycles right now, because if I were not giving this talk, I would be on my bicycle this very minute. But I'm here, and it's really an honor to share some stories with you. I think every day should start with a poem. So let's start with a poem. One of my favorite poets is Mary Oliver, and this is one of my favorites of hers. It's called Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about your despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. Although I'm going to be sharing stories of some of my experiences, the good news is this is not a talk about me. This is really a talk about my patients. It's a talk about their families. And ultimately, it's a presentation about you. Within each and every one of us is this innate power to heal and to be healed. Not all patients can be cured, but every patient can be healed. And the practice of medicine is really about human beings caring for other human beings. And that's the essence of humanity. I want to share with you a story about Margaret Mead. She's a famous American cultural anthropologist. And she was asked by a student once to tell what was the first sign of civilization in a culture. And he thought she was going to talk about clay pots or tools or fish hooks. But she said that the first sign of civilization in a culture was when she came across a human femur that had been broken and then healed. So a bone that had healed. And in nature, if you break your femur, you're going to die. If you're any other mammal who breaks your femur, you're going to be subject to the elements and to probably being eaten. That finding a human femur that had been broken and healed really meant that somebody had taken care of this individual who was injured. And that's really where civilization begins. When we serve others and help others through difficult times, that's really the hallmark of humanity. In 2020, my first book was published. The book and this presentation really had been quietly forming for a long time. And I want to acknowledge right now the role that my patients and their families have played in shaping me as a doctor, in shaping me as a person. Every patient has a story. And yes, your stories include medical science. It includes scans and surgeries and chemotherapy and radiation therapy and hormone therapy. But it is really a story fundamentally about your life and not about your illness. In in 2001, I did a mountain climbing trip to the Himalayas. It was nothing altruistic about it. I was into mountain climbing. And if you're a mountain climber, where do you want to go? You want to go to where the highest mountains in the world are. So in 2001, I signed up for a major mountain climbing expedition. What do you think is the number one requirement to be chosen to be on a major mountain climbing expedition? Some of you probably know it's you got to have a good credit card. Really, that's the only requirement, is that your credit card clears and you're on the team. So I was going to go all the way to Nepal to meet 4 other people from around the world who all I really knew about them is that they had good credit. So I flew to Kathmandu, met up with the group of climbers. And again, I thought this was a trip about going further, farther, faster, higher, and sort of getting bragging rights at cocktail conversations about something I had accomplished. I was blown away by the fact that it changed my life in so many ways. I came to Nepal, as a good ex-Boy Scout, totally prepared, new backpack, new coat, new hat, new gloves, extra coat, extra hat, extra gloves, new sleeping bag, good for 50 below zero. We flew out into the remote foothills. First night, I got to use my new sleeping bag, good to 50 below zero. It was 90 degrees and 90% humidity. And it was going to be a week of hiking through the villages before we even saw the mountains. It doesn't take too many days of hiking with a big backpack filled with stuff, more stuff, and extra stuff before you realize that this stuff that we're carrying is not only unnecessary, but a burden. And after weeks of climbing in the mountains with a small group of people, with a shared vision, a shared mission out under the beautiful mountains, I realized that sometimes we carry around with us in our mind things that are not only unnecessary, but a burden. And that trip was really a spiritual journey for me and changed my life in many ways, making me realize how wonderful it is to be in nature, to be with another group of people with a shared mission, and really to see the face of God in ways I'd never seen before. I knew it would be wonderful to take a group of people I cared about on a similar mission. And out of that experience eventually came Above and Beyond Cancer. Above and Beyond Cancer, we date back to 2011. And in 2011, I took 29 cancer survivors and caregivers on a journey climbing to Everest Base Camp. It was definitely a physical endeavor, but as you'll find out, it was also so much more than that. Fear, suffering, courage, community, hope, joy, beauty, gratitude. These are all part of a journey like this, just like it's part of a journey in life. And in many ways, climbing a mountain recapitulates what many of you experience in your cancer journey. Since that first journey to Everest Base Camp, I've taken thousands of patients on journeys to mountain ranges around the world and in the United States. And these journeys have become an important part of my life and an important part of the lives of many individuals who have gone on the journeys. The stories and photographs in this presentation are from those journeys. So welcome to stories of bliss and blisters, to tales of grit and awe and surrender. Welcome to journeys that are lived by people who know the profound impact of facing mortality square in the jaw. I hope this presentation will take you to every dimension of what it means to be human, what it means to live in a world that is both fraught with suffering and joy. This journey is really about the philosophical aspect of a journey through cancer. It's really in many ways about what you and your families go through on your cancer journeys. So in this presentation, you'll hear stories of steep and arduous climbs. You'll also have moments of bone-chilling self-encounter, moments of despair, moments of peace, fragrant with stillness and accomplishment. So again, thanks to all my patients and their families and everyone who's been on these journeys. And a special note of thanks to photographer and filmmaker Dylan Huey. He contributed most of the photographs that you'll see in this presentation. I mentioned Above and Beyond Cancer. So we date Above and Beyond Cancer to 2011. It's a nonprofit cancer survivorship organization dedicated to elevating the lives of those touched by cancer to create a healthier world. And although I'm going to talk about the journeys, really Above and Beyond Cancer is so much more than the journey that we do once a year. Pretty much 365 days of the year, we have activities that are going on for cancer survivors and their families. And we like to think of it as really optimal living. How do you take a bump in the road of life and turn it into a springboard to healthier living rather than a barrier? So we focus on mind, body, spirit. We focus on nutrition and physical activity and social connectedness. We partner with the YMCAs in the area. We partner with other fitness clubs. We also do activities in the state parks and city parks and on the lakes. We have outdoor hiking, outdoor walking, outdoor cycling, indoor cycling, Reiki, Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation, calisthenics, running, pretty much everything you can think of, along with book clubs and cooking classes. In addition to the Above and Beyond Cancer, which we do out in the community, through everything I've learned with Above and Beyond Cancer and my patients and their families, I have created in my cancer center an integrative medicine program for cancer survivors. And this is for patients, regardless of where they are in the cancer journey, just have been diagnosed with cancer, in the middle of treatment, done with cancer treatment and cured of cancer, or on a journey living with incurable cancer. We know that taking care of patients and their families is much more than just killing cancer cells. It's about taking care of individuals and patients and family members. So within our integrative medicine program, we've brought on acupuncture, chiropractic care, massage therapy, osteopathic manipulation, physical therapy, mental health counseling for patients, mental health counseling for family members, pastoral care, spiritual counseling, sexual health counseling, bereavement counseling, music therapy, art therapy, pet therapy, support groups, nutritional counseling. And most of those things I just mentioned are not covered by insurance. So I'm proud to say that through an endowment that we created through philanthropy from my health system and from many, many individuals in the community, all of the services I described that aren't covered are by insurance are provided free of charge to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay. As I mentioned, this is really a partnership that happens because of the passion of individuals like you who are seeking out these sorts of treatments. We know that in addition to killing cancer cells, we need to pay attention to the psychosocial needs, philosophical needs, spiritual needs, financial needs that individuals face on their journey. So once a year, Above and Beyond Cancer does what we call a gonzo trip. And I want to take you along with me on this journey on the first trip that we did. And this was to climb to Everest Base Camp there in the background. And it was in 2011. So let me introduce you to the cast of characters that were with us on that very first journey. So this is Justin. Justin was the youngest member of this journey. He was 26 at the time. Justin was lead singer in a rock band in Clear Lake, Iowa, and part-time waiter at Buffalo Wild Wings. Justin was experiencing a headache for a couple of days. He went to the local emergency room. A scan demonstrated a tumor the size of a racquetball in his right temporal lobe. Turned out to be a grade 3 astrocytoma. This was before the Affordable Care Act. He was actually surprised that he had health insurance through Buffalo Wild Wings, but he found out pretty quickly that the entire year expenditure that his health insurance at that time would pay was a total of $500. So his health insurance didn't even pay for the scan that found his tumor. He went to the University of Iowa, lived in the Hope Lodge while he got his cancer treatment. So 6 weeks of radiation, 6 months of chemotherapy, and he was just a couple of months out from his cancer journey when he came along with us on this journey. Teresa was 42 years old when she was diagnosed with breast cancer in both breasts simultaneously. She had surgery, chemotherapy, reconstruction. 8 years before having both of her breasts removed, she'd had a total hip replacement. And 2 years before that, she'd had her entire colon removed for ulcerative colitis. Not an athlete, not a mountain climber. She works as a radiation therapist treating cancer patients. And she wanted to be on this journey to be part of something bigger than herself. Bobby is the only person I've ever diagnosed with cancer in the YMCA locker room. So a buddy of mine, we work out together along with a bunch of others, and 5 a.m. he comes up to me in the locker room and says, "Hey, doc, take a feel of this." He had a big lymph node in his neck, turned out to be stage 4 tonsil cancer. Darn near killed him with the chemotherapy and radiation therapy. He was 2 years out from his cancer journey when we started the trip to Nepal. This is Amelia. Amelia was 24 when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. Surgery, chemotherapy, radiation therapy. She was just 2 years out from her cancer treatment. Lynette was 38 years old when she was nursing her only child, and her breast swelled up, became tender, thought it was an infection, turned out to be an advanced breast cancer. She had chemotherapy, surgery, radiation therapy, and she was cancer-free for 4 years. Her cancer came back, more surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, and she was cancer-free again for 3 years. Cancer came back again, more surgery, chemotherapy, radiation. By this time, Parker was 8 years old. Lynette is not an athlete, not a mountain climber, but she worked for the American Cancer Society, and she decided she also wanted to be part of something bigger than herself. So she brought along Chad, her husband, and left Parker with grandpas and grandmas back home. Lynette's probably, 90 pounds soaking wet. Chad, on the other hand, a big bruising athlete, 220. And when you're up in the mountains for weeks on end, it really helps to have some extra body fat and muscle on your frame. First person to get sick on the trip was Chad. Horrible diarrhea. Lynette took care of him the entire climb. I remember this beautiful letter that I got from Lynette when we got back. She said, for the last 8 years, Chad had been taking care of me. This was my first opportunity to take care of Chad. Karen was a breast cancer survivor, had early stage breast cancer, lumpectomy, radiation, hormone therapy, was a couple years out from her cancer journey. Kathy was 52 years old when I first met her. Kathy has neurofibromatosis, so thousands of benign tumors throughout her body. About 2 years before we took off on this journey, one of her benign neurofibromas turned into a malignant sarcoma. She had it removed from her left forearm. A year later, it came back. She had more surgery, radiation. Her left arm doesn't quite work right, and we had to use an ace bandage to kind of keep her attached to her hiking pole. Oh, and also she has a total knee replacement. She also has very poor vision, very poor balance, and is deathly afraid of heights. All the attributes you want in a mountain climbing partner. Kathy literally fell down more times than we could count on the trip. But as all of you know, it's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get back up that matters. And Kathy got back up one more time than she fell down and made it all the way. Gail was the old man of this first journey. He was a mere 66 years old. He had had his prostate removed many years before for prostate cancer. His prostate cancer had recurred, and he'd had radiation therapy, and he was just a few years out from his treatment when he came on this journey. Lynn is a breast cancer survivor as well, surgery, chemotherapy, radiation. And she works as a mental health counselor for patients in our cancer center. She was a couple years out from her treatment when she came along on this journey with us. Brandon was 22 years old when he was diagnosed with an aggressive lymphoma. He was hospitalized for a total of 6 months up at the Mayo Clinic for extensive chemotherapy and donor bone marrow transplant back at that time. He was about 3 years out from his journey, still getting his strength back when he signed up to be part of this mission. Peggy Scott, a South Dakota State jackrabbit and a physical therapist and a breast cancer survivor. Trace, stage 4 Hodgkin's disease. When I met Trace, he was on the active duty for the Des Moines Police Department on the SWAT team. And I have to tell you, I didn't even know Des Moines, Iowa had a SWAT team. So his cancer diagnosis was that he had, as I said, stage 4 Hodgkin's disease with involvement of bones. He'd had a bunch of chemotherapy, a little bit of radiation therapy, and he was cancer-free for about 9 months. His cancer recurred. He had a whole bunch of chemotherapy, stem cell transplant. His cancer recurred after that, more chemotherapy and radiation. And he was only about a year cancer-free when he came on the trip. And I remember 3 days before we were going to get on the airplane to fly to Nepal, he calls me up and he says, "Hey, Doc, I have spent a lot of time in your office. How about you spend a little bit of time in my office? Tell you what, Doc, show up at your curbside in front of your house tomorrow morning at 2 a.m., dressed all in black, and I'll pick you up." So there I am on the curb, dressed all in black. He picks me up. He's dressed all in black. We go to the SWAT team headquarters where there's 10 other guys dressed all in black. And they put us into this armored vehicle called a Bearcat. I mean, I can't believe they let this guy take his doctor. I guess because I'm dressed all in black, it was permissible. I had lived in Des Moines for over 20 years at the point I had this experience, but we went into a part of Des Moines I'd never been to. I can't tell you what happened that day, but we did make it back to the SWAT team headquarters in time to get to the airport 2 days later to make our flight to Nepal. Stacy, breast cancer survivor, had what appeared to be early stage breast cancer, lumpectomy, radiation, hormone therapy. Within a year, her cancer had recurred, bilateral mastectomy, chemotherapy, reconstruction. And my screen just froze up. There we go. Sorry about that. Linda was the oldest woman on this trip. She was 56 at the time, and she was the principal at Albia High School, active duty on, and she brought along her son, left her husband at home. Her son left his wife and kids at home, and they came on the journey. And she's a Hodgkin's disease survivor, so chemotherapy and radiation therapy. We actually did an all-school assembly for Albia High School from Everest Base Camp. So what do those cancer survivors have in common? Well, number one, none of them were mountain climbers. Number two, most were not serious athletes. Number three, none of them had Mount Everest on their bucket list. What these individuals had in common was their cancer. Not just the cancer, but the courage and confidence they gained in their cancer journey that allowed them to sign up for this. They were on this journey not in spite of their cancer. They were on this journey because of their cancer. Again, because of the courage and confidence they had that they could take on a challenge. They did not know if they could climb the mountain, but they knew that trying to climb the mountain was going to be an incredibly powerful experience. So we got together at the YMCA Healthy Living Center twice a week to exercise. We did resistance training, we did aerobic training, and then the trip was in April. So every Saturday in March, we would go out and climb the mountains of central Iowa to get adjusted to the steepness and the altitude that we were going to experience in the Himalayas. And then we got an airplane and we flew from Des Moines to Chicago, Chicago to Abu Dhabi, overnight in Abu Dhabi, and then Abu Dhabi to Kathmandu. Now, Kathmandu, if you get a globe out, it is literally halfway around the world. It's 12-hour time difference. So we spent a couple of days in Kathmandu just exploring the World Heritage sites, the religions, taking in the sights and sounds and smells of the city. And then we got on a little bitty airplane and we flew up into the mountains. So we flew to a little village with a runway called Lukla. And if you look up Lukla, first thing that comes up is world's most dangerous airport. So why is it the most dangerous airport? Well, it's a little bitty runway. And at that time, it was just grass. And it is literally surrounded by the world's highest mountain. So it's at about 10,000 feet. And you fly in these little bitty planes and you land on a runway that's about 15 degrees slanted and it ends in a mountain. So if you don't stick the landing, you're basically stuck. And so you fly in these little planes. The little planes land. They keep the engines running. They open the doors. You throw out your gear. You jump out. And then people that have already completed their journey to their climb and want to go back to Kathmandu, they throw their gear in. They jump in. The airplane turns around. And the runway isn't quite long enough to get lift, but it's built on a cliff. So you basically fly off the cliff to get back to Kathmandu. Hence, the world's most dangerous airport. So we landed there. It took us 2 planes to get everybody up there. The planes take off. No more motorized transportation. It's just us and the pathway to the mountain. I was surprised at the emotions when we got there and the planes took off and it's just us and the path in the mountains. I knew the trip was going to be difficult. That's part of the reason we were doing it. I knew it was going to be physically challenging, but I also knew it was going to be emotionally challenging, that people were going to get homesick, that it would be really difficult, and that to get through this, it would be good to have a rhythm to each day. So we created this rhythm every day. The first thing that we did every morning was to be awakened by the rustle of a tent door, by the Sherpas with a cup of hot tea, and a greetings of namaste, a greeting that acknowledges the divine within each of us. And then we would assemble for breakfast, and one of the cancer survivors would share a blessing, grace before the meal, thanking everyone that had grown the crops, that had carried the food up the mountain, that had prepared the food for us, thanking the individuals back home that were doing our job for us so that we could be there, and praying that we would have the strength to get through the day and the wisdom to learn what the mountain was going to teach us. And then we would go outside after breakfast and we took along our yoga instructor and we would do some yoga before starting the climb. And then we would get together before setting foot on the path and spend a little time doing a bit of a reflection, sort of setting the tone for the day. And I want to share with you a blessing that I shared with the group that very first day that we set foot on the path to head up the mountains. This is called For a New Beginning by John O'Donohue. It's from a book called To Bless the Space Between Us. I'd highly recommend it. It's a book of blessings. John O'Donohue grew up in Ireland, and he died unexpectedly at age 52. This book of blessings was put together after his death, and it's kind of a combination of poetry and prayer. And this is the blessing that I shared with the group that very first day, and it was called appropriately "For a New Beginning." In out of the way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it's watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety, the great promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, and wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight, when your courage kindled and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. So come with me up the mountain on the Khumbu Trail up to Everest. So the Khumbu Trail parallels the Dudkosi River. It starts in Lukla. The villages are you go through several villages. When the path starts at Lukla, it's about 10 feet wide. It's fairly groomed. But as you go higher and go through villages, the path becomes narrower and steeper the higher you get. But look at the beauty of this trail. I mean, you are in the middle of the highest mountains in the world. We were blessed with just gorgeous weather. You've got beauty and awe and wonder and just absolute glory and headaches and diarrhea and blisters and dirty underwear and fellowship and camaraderie and joy. Like life, a trip to Everest Base Camp is filled with suffering and joy. You can't do one of these trips without suffering. And in fact, we promise triple money back guarantee that you will have suffering. And if you don't get enough suffering, we can get some extra for you. There's also challenges. So if you're a little bit afraid of heights, crossing this bridge with a that's swinging and swaying, and sometimes there are yak on the bridge coming in the opposite direction, we provide suffering and challenge along the way. How do you get a group of individuals who've never climbed a mountain up to 20,000 feet? So I will say there's different strategies. Sometimes it's a kick in the butt and a can of suck it up. Sometimes it is some high altitude medicine sprinkled liberally with antibiotics. But the secret weapon to climbing a mountain is hugs. Some days you're strong and you're reaching out your hand and helping someone else up. And on other days, you're the recipient of somebody else's help. But the secret weapon to getting a group up the mountain is hugs. How do you climb a mountain? One step at a time. All you have to do is decide why you're there and that you have the power to do one more step and then do it again. This is Kathy. I told you about Kathy. Kathy has neurofibromatosis. She doesn't see very well. She has very poor balance. Her left arm doesn't work. She's got an artificial knee. Every step of the journey was a challenge for Kathy. Here she is with Sherpas by her side. Every step was a challenge. The bridges were certainly a challenge. Crossing streams was a challenge. I love this this photograph to your left. So Kathy's in the pink hat. And then behind her is Teresa. And I told you about Teresa as well. Teresa's had both of her breasts removed, her colon removed, has an artificial hip. Very early on the first day of hiking, Teresa knew that there was only one person on the whole journey that was slower than she was, and that was Kathy. And Teresa also knew that helping Kathy was something that provided her great joy on the journey. So I could show you 1,000 versions of that picture of Teresa helping Kathy under the watchful eye of the Sherpa. I was getting a little feedback. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I think we're good now. Thank you.
Okay. This is Lynette. Excuse me, this is Lynn. So Lynn, as you remember, is a mental health counselor, breast cancer survivor. About 3 days before we get to the highest point, she's having altitude sickness. And we treated her with every possible medicine we had, but she just wasn't getting better. So the best treatment for altitude sickness is to go down the mountain to lower altitude. This is Anglok Pa. Anglok Pa was one of our Sherpas, and she took Lynn down the mountain through several villages to her own home and nursed her back to health. The trip we were doing was really an up and back, so we picked Lynn up on the way back, and she had a wonderful experience, recuperated, and did just fine. As you go higher and higher, as I said, the path becomes narrower and narrower, steeper. So by this time, we are 10 days in. Everybody's got a sore throat, a snotty nose, dirty underwear, blisters. It is cold. It's starting to snow. The path is steep and rocky. And in the distance is Everest Base Camp. We arrived at Everest Base Camp, and as I mean, you couldn't write the script. As if on cue, Kathy fell flat on her face, like she had done 100 times before, and got up like she had done 100 times before, and said, "I'm okay, I'm okay." And I don't think any of us were prepared for how emotional it was going to be to make it to that destination. So we slept in little pup tents on the glacier. The next day, the snow stopped, the sun was out. It was just beaming and bouncing off of the glaciers. We did a American Cancer Society Relay for Life at Everest Base Camp that day. We took along with us prayer flags. Prayer flags are traditional in the Himalayas. The traditional ones are the 5 different colors, but each one is inscribed with a Tibetan prayer, Om Mani Padme Om, and they're flown in beautiful, high, and auspicious places. And the way it works is that as the breeze ripples the flag, it carries the prayer around the world to all sentient beings. Well, our prayer flags were the same shape and color as the Tibetan prayer flags, but instead of being inscribed with a Tibetan prayer, each of our prayer flags were lovingly decorated in memory of someone who had died of cancer, or in honor of someone who was on their cancer journey and couldn't physically be with us. This is Chris in the green flag. Chris is forever 21. Chris was a patient of mine. He was a student at Grinnell College when he died of his very unusual sarcoma. He was just so full of life with every part of his life, even as he was going through a journey that ultimately caused him to lose function of both of his legs and one of his arms. When it was in the newspaper that I was going to take a group of my patients to Everest Base Camp, his dad called me that morning. I was driving to work. Didn't even know it was in the newspaper. And Chris had died about a year before. And Chris's dad said, Chris would have been all over this. And I said, Chris is coming along. And through that conversation, we came up with the Prayer Flag Project to have individuals create this flag that we would then carry with us. So we carried Chris and I carried my mom, who had died of cancer when I was in medical school, and many patients, and we all carried them with us all the way to the top. And we used them to help create this track up at Everest Base Camp for the American Cancer Society Relay for Life. And as many of you that have participated in that know, it's about celebration, celebrating cancer survivorship, celebrating our accomplishment, but it's also about remembering those who aren't with us. And it's also about fighting back. So the last lap we did, 20,000 feet running, was about fighting back, vowing that those that have died will not have died in vain, and that they will inspire us and, in fact, demand of us that we do something to make a difference in the world. And after the Relay for Life, we shared a few more hugs, took another photograph, and we headed down the mountain. What had taken us 10 days to get up took us about 4 days to get back down. And before you know it, we were standing at the top of the escalator, ready to descend to the lobby of the Des Moines airport. And I remember we let everybody go first, and we kind of huddled together and said a little prayer. And I remember thinking, this journey has changed our lives. We may not know how it's changed our lives, but it's changed our lives. And as we descend this escalator and begin our lives again, I hope that we can each find the Sherpa within each of us to use the journey and the experience we had, not just to illuminate our own path, but to help illuminate and help the path of others on their journey. And I would say most of us were in a bit of a fog, with still halfway living our days, still thinking about the journey, but life goes on. And about a month after we were back home, Kathy calls me and says, "Hey, Doc, I got this lump behind my knee." And I said, "It's probably just an inflamed Baker cyst. We put on lots of miles. Come on in. Let's take a look." Turned out to be a new sarcoma. And over the course of her life, she experienced that time and time again. A month after that, I got a call on my cell phone. There were lots of numbers on the phone. I go, "Oh, this is an international call." I answer the call. It is our head Sherpa, Lakpa, Ang Lakpa's husband. And he says, Dr. Dick, Ang Lakpa has cancer." And I thought, oh my gosh. I remember saying, "Oh, we can help." And my thoughts were, I can't believe that up in the Himalayas that we'd even be able to make a diagnosis. I think most people who get cancer up in the mountains end up dying without ever knowing they had cancer. Turns out she did have a type of leukemia that is treatable but not curable. And the treatment costs about $60,000 a year. So the first thing we did as an organization, Above and Beyond Cancer, was to talk to the manufacturer of the oral medication, and they allowed her to get it for free, but she has to go from her mountain village to Kathmandu once a month to get a blood test and the oral medication. And it takes 2 weeks for her to walk there. So we fly Ang Lakpa from the world's most dangerous airport to Kathmandu once a month, so she can get her blood test and get her oral medication, and then fly back up into the village. And as I said, life goes on. I thought this journey to Everest was just a one and done. I knew we were going to continue doing all of the cancer survivorship that we do here in the community, but I thought that journey was just one and done. I knew it was going to change the lives of everyone on the journey. But what I didn't realize until after we returned was how a journey like this has the power, through ripple effect, to also change the lives of others who weren't even on the journey with us. As we encouraged and promoted the individuals on the journey to tell their story, to write their story, to get engaged and involved. So what started off as just a one and done trip has now turned into an annual journey for us. So if you thought those 29 folks that went to Everest in 2011 were something, take a look at the 41 here in the summit of Kilimanjaro in 2012. Included in this group was a 72-year-old Catholic priest with incurable cancer, a 42-year-old woman with lymphoma on chemotherapy, a 65-year-old farmer's wife who had never slept in a tent before. The next year, we did a little bicycle ride. Well, not really a bicycle ride, a bicycle race. So myself and 7 cancer survivors entered the Race Across America, a 3,000-mile bike ride from California to Maryland, where you ride 24 hours a day, 3,000 miles. We did it in 6 days, 21 hours, and 17 minutes. You have no idea what you are capable of if you just keep putting one foot or one pedal in front of the other. The next year we went back to the Himalayas, and this time we did what we called a spiritual journey. So we took along with us cancer survivors of many different faiths. We had Catholics, Protestants, Mormons, Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, agnostics, and one self-declared atheist. And we journeyed through the Himalayas, stopping at every shrine, temple, monastery, and convent along the way. And we summited 3 mountains, a 16,000-foot peak, an 18,000-foot peak, and a 20,000-foot peak with crampons and ice axes. And included in this group was, again, Father Frank, 73 years old with incurable cancer, Reverend Richard, an Episcopal minister with incurable cancer, Ruth, a 65-year-old cancer survivor from Minneapolis who'd had her arm amputated for a sarcoma. And I remember as we're going up the final pitch with ice axe and crampons, and we're huffing and puffing, and she says, you know, Doc, there's 2 really good things about being handicapped. Back home in Minneapolis, I get great parking, and up here, you gave me 2 Sherpas for myself. The next year, we did a little bit of a run. Well, actually, it was a 4,000-mile run. We started in Oregon on the Pacific Ocean, and we ran 4 marathons a day for 40 days in a row, 4,000 miles, ending at Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. The next year, we went south of the border down to South America, group of cancer survivors and caregivers, up and over the Andes Mountains and down into Machu Picchu. The next year, we were going to go to Tibet, but the big earthquake happened in the Himalayas. And so we did a medical mission trip to Kathmandu and spent time at a cancer hospital that cares for the most vulnerable. Here is Kelly Donato, a sarcoma survivor, helping provide some joy to a sarcoma survivor there in the Himalayas. Next, we went back to Africa, and we had a group of 39 cancer survivors and caregivers, including 5 with incurable cancer, 4 over the age of 65, summiting back up to the summit of Kilimanjaro. Then we had this pesky little thing called COVID that kind of clipped our wings for a few years. So instead of traveling overseas, we went, out of order. This is 2018. This is before COVID. So we finally got our journey to Tibet. So this was the journey to the most sacred mountain in the world. You see, it kind of looks like a pyramid in the background. That's Mount Kailash. It's about 24,000 feet high. No one has ever summited it, not because it's not summitable, but because it is so sacred. So in the Hindu religion, Shiva lives at the top. It's sacred in about 6 different religions, and individuals circumambulate, go all the way around the mountain. As you go all the way around the mountain, you get up to 20,000 feet. And if you go around the mountain, complete the entire 360, your sins are absolved for a lifetime. So we did a 110-mile trek, ending with the circumambulation of Mount Kailash. And of course, some want to know, well, does this count for future sins, or does it only absolve our... We didn't get a straight answer to that, but it changed the lives of everyone on the journey. Then Once our wings got clipped, we stayed domestic. We did a trip to the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, and the next year to the canyons of southern Utah, and the next year up to Wyoming. This year, our wings grew again, and we went back to Africa. A group of 31 cancer survivors and caregivers age 18 to 73 on a humanitarian mission, and again, summiting Mount Kilimanjaro. Invariably, at this point in my talk, if I'm giving it out in the public, somebody will come up and say, gee, I wish I had cancer so I could do something like that. That's not the moral of the story. You don't have to have cancer to get off your butt and to live your life, big and bold. So let me just share with you sort of the moral of the story, life lessons that I have learned from my patients and their families. Number one, none of us is as good as all of us. There's not a single thing that any one of you has ever done all by yourself that's worth a hill of beans. Anything that is worth accomplishing takes a team, whether it's the team that summits Mount Kilimanjaro, the bicycle team, and all of the support that's riding the bike 3,000 miles across the country, or climbing Mount Imjase. It takes a team. Second, sorry about that. My slides froze up. Or the running across the mirror. Here we are at Rehoboth Beach after a 4,000-mile run. Number two, adversity leads to personal growth. When everything is going totally fine in your life, you don't learn much about what you're truly capable of. When things are difficult and challenging, you have the capability to tap into some strength that you might not have known. I wouldn't say that cancer gives you strength, but I would say that cancer and other difficulties that we face in life allow us to find strength that we have deep within us. And when we find that strength and recognize that strength, that's what we call resiliency. Everybody's heard of post-traumatic stress, where you go through a difficult time without support and you come out the other end without the ability to take on even normal challenges. I would say the opposite is probably more common, post-traumatic growth, that when you go through a difficult experience with support, you come out the other end with a greater sense of what your own strength is. You come out with a sense of gratitude and courage, and you might even intentionally put a mountain in your pathway. Here's Steve in the middle. Steve's 70 years old, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, incurable cancer, never climbed a mountain before. Not easy. He would not have put this mountain in his pathway if it weren't for his cancer journey. Connie, 65 years old, farmer's wife, never spent a night in a tent, was just 6 months out from surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation, makes it to the summit of Kilimanjaro. Here we are up and over the Continental Divide just 2 days into our bike ride across the country, or up that final pitch of a 20,000-foot Imjase. Third, courage is grace under pressure. Courage is not the absence of fear. Fear is a good thing. Fear says, hey, buddy, wake up. There is something potentially dangerous here. Pay attention. So courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is using fear as a source of creativity, ingenuity to proceed forward, mitigating all of the risks. This is John and Dr. Hyatt. Halfway up Kilimanjaro, John gets this abscess of his jaw. So we treat him with every antibiotic we have in our backpacks, but it's still getting worse. So we say, John, you got to go down the mountain. And he said, you guys are doctors. You want me to wander down the mountain and just go into an emergency room? No, just take care of me here. So we did a little mountainside surgery with a Swiss Army knife. We were able to relieve the pocket of pus. He got better and he made it to the top. Courage, grace under pressure. This is Corey with the sunglasses, deathly afraid of heights. I would say that he didn't necessarily overcome his fear of heights permanently, but he was able, courage, grace under pressure, one step at a time, with support to make it to the top. How do you climb a mountain? One step at a time. But not every step is created equal. This is an appropriate time for you to experience fear and for fear to wake you up and say, hey, buddy, pay attention, watch your step. This is an important step. Courage, using fear to pay attention and still move forward. Or crossing a raging river in South America without handrails. Fourth, suffering leads to compassion. This is my buddy, Father Frank, and his niece, Annie. Father Frank has stage 4 cancer. Annie was cured of thyroid cancer. Father Frank and I were climbing one day, and we were sort of riffing about this relationship between suffering and compassion. And he said to me, well, Doc, if you spoke Latin, you wouldn't be amazed at the relationship. It's right there in the words. The word for suffering in Latin is passion, as in the passion of Christ. And the word compassion in Latin literally means with one's suffering. So it's suffering that we experience that allow us to know what suffering is, but also allows us to recognize when we see suffering in someone else. And not just to recognize that they're suffering, but to want to reach out compassionately to relieve suffering. And as I mentioned to you, we promise you suffering if you go on these journeys. This is Bev, who is at the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. And this is shortly after she said, you guys go on without me, just leave me here to die. Of course, we didn't. When I see her now in follow-up, I can't believe she says, that trip wasn't that hard. And I have to kind of remind her of this photograph. This is Carrie. Carrie is still reminding us of the relationship between suffering and compassion. Carrie was just a few months out from her cancer treatment. She left behind at home her husband Travis and 3-year-old daughter Lily. The first night of camping on the mountain Kilimanjaro, before we even began the real climb, she is so homesick for her family, and she's got diarrhea, and I'm going, there's just no way she's going to make it. So I'm thinking, we're probably going to have to figure a way to get her back, but we had to get through the night. So I ordered up 39 hugs. Everybody gave Carrie a hug, and the next morning, she comes out of her tent and says, I'm going to do it. And 5 days later, she's standing at the top of Kilimanjaro. She comes back, and her little daughter, Lily, is at the airport. My mommy, the mountain climber. 6 months later, Carrie's cancer recurs. And 3 months later, she dies of her cancer. She's still teaching us about compassion and about suffering. Fifth, having a higher purpose is a secret weapon to success. I've done a lot of adventure traveling, and it's a lot of fun, but I can tell you there's nothing like traveling with a group of individuals that have a higher purpose in mind. Here we are in the summit of Kilimanjaro with 500 prayer flags, getting ready to have the highest ever relay for life in the world. Here we are riding our bikes across America. Instead of prayer flags, we had decorated our water bottles. And Carrie's funeral happened on the first day of our bike ride. So we all have a bottle with Carrie. And as we reach down and pick up Carrie, she provides us not only sustenance, but inspiration to continue to pedal. Here's Father Frank saying Mass in front of Mount Kilimanjaro. or having another prayer flag ceremony in the Himalayas. Number 6, take time for reflection. Take time to think about what's important in life, what brings you joy, what brings you meaning, whether it's saying a blessing before a meal, whether it's participating in a formal religious experience, whether it's sharing a blessing with your group or a reflection before a meeting or a poem, or making a flag. This is Michael Brick, a colon cancer survivor on top of a mountain in the Himalayas. And this day that he summited this mountain was the 1-year anniversary that his mom had died of lung cancer. And he's carrying a flag that he and his wife and his children had made for Grandma Jan. Here's Ruth. Ruth's left arm was amputated for treatment of a sarcoma. She's here in the Himalayas carrying a prayer flag for her sister who had died of melanoma. Memento mori. Remember that you will die. And that's not meant to be pessimistic. It's just to remind each of us that we're not dead, but that someday we will be. It is not a depressing statement. It is a clarion bugle call to wake you up to the fact that you are alive and you have today in front of us, but that someday you will be dead. I introduced you to 14 cancer survivors that went with us in 2011 to Everest. In the last 3 years, Justin's cancer recurred, became a glioblastoma, and he died on March 2nd last year. Bobby died of a stroke 2 years ago. Lynette's cancer came back a third, fourth, and fifth time. Karen survived her breast cancer and 2 years ago died of pancreas cancer. And Kathy's sarcomas kept recurring and recurring. Kathy was always at our I teach a spin class for cancer survivors every Wednesday night. And as her disease progressed, she lost the use of one of her legs and both of her legs and then one of her arms. And she still would come to spin class. Instead of sitting on the bike, she'd be in her electric wheelchair and she would do a hand crank and sing along with the music as we did spin class. And Kathy died 3 years ago. But these individuals, we mourn them, we miss them, but how do you appropriately celebrate someone's life that has inspired you so? It's by vowing that each and every day you and I will wring as much joy and meaning and purpose out of each and every day. And that leads us to the final lesson. Live today with passion. If diamonds were as plentiful as grains of sand, they would be worthless. If you and I lived forever, wasting a day of our life would be trivial. But it's because we don't live forever that today is so valuable. What are you going to do today to bring joy to your life and bring joy to someone else's life? It is your job as a human being to figure out what brings joy, to bring more joy into your life, to bring more joy into the lives of everyone you love, and to live life big and bold, reaching above and beyond what you ever thought was possible. Final words of wisdom from the Dalai Lama. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. Thank you for having me today, and happy to answer any questions or happy to listen as you share with me some of your experiences. So,
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Deming. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. I would like to open it up. We have a few minutes. If anybody's brave enough to come off mute, we've heard a lot of inspiring stories. We have a couple comments in the chat box if you want to review those, where I can send them at a later time, Dr. Deming. But feel free to come off mute, ask any questions at this time.
Dr. Deming, I have a question. So it seems, you work with a lot of cancer patients that are just phenomenal people. Um, how do you suggest, or how have your patients kind of handled dealing with that constant fear of recurrence? I feel like I'm almost a year out from my initial diagnosis of stage 3B infiltrative ductal carcinoma. I've gone through chemotherapy, 28 rounds of radiation, bilateral mastectomy. I'm doing targeted chemotherapy right now. I'm doing hormone therapy, and I'm getting close to the point where my checkups aren't going to be as close together. And I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. So, how do you recommend getting through that or dealing with it?
Yeah, well, thanks, Michelle, for sharing your story. And you look fabulous. I'm so glad that the treatments are going well. I would say that first and foremost is to recognize it is absolutely, totally normal to have fear of recurrence, that is not abnormal. That is totally normal. It's part of, fear is tells us to pay attention. But we do have ways of making sure that the fear of recurrence is used in a positive way and doesn't adversely affect your life. So the positive fear of recurrence is you're not going to miss your appointments. You're going to get your appropriate scans. You're going to pay attention to signs and symptoms. So those are appropriate responses to fear of recurrence. But being incapacitated for doing normal things is not. So we have several things. Number one, mindfulness is huge. So we have mindfulness-based stress reduction. So we have a coach. So a mindfulness coach is really more of a coach than a counselor. So it's a coach that teaches us how can we be in the here and now. So someone once said, the twin thieves of happiness are regrets of yesterday and worrying about tomorrow. So the more that we can live in the here and now, right now, this very second, both you, Michelle, and me, we both have everything we need in this moment for perfect joy. How do we live in this moment? Doesn't mean we don't reflect on the past. It doesn't mean we don't plan for the future, but how when that fear of recurrence kidnaps us from this moment and takes us off and our mind starts perseverating, how can we recognize what's happening and bring us back to the here and now? So mindfulness practice is one way of doing it. And the second thing that we have is we do have counselors who do cognitive behavior modification therapy that work with fear of recurrence. So we happen to have one of our mental health counselors who really focuses on that. So those are two ways that we do it to help coach someone to mindfulness, and then to have also a mental health counselor. The other thing that is helpful is to have fellowship, camaraderie, things in your life that remind you of higher purpose. As a cancer doctor, you cannot stay in the profession of oncology for 40 some years if you don't also come to an acceptance of your own death. And I think that accepting our own mortality is a good thing for every human being, regardless of whether you've been diagnosed with an illness or not. And so I would say that actually befriending your own mortality can also help reduce the paralyzing effect of fear of recurrence. Because ultimately, as a human being, if we accept our mortality, then the fact that we may die someday is just a fact and not something that paralyzes us. Easier said than done, but those would be just some suggestions that I would have for you definitely mindfulness. Doesn't have to be necessarily even a formal meditation practice, but recognizing when your mind is wandering and bringing it back to the here and now.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Deming. I'm going to just cut in. I know we're getting close on being at the end of time. We did promote this event using a few things that we wanted to give away. So I'm going to quickly do a giveaway, and then we'll open it up for maybe one last question if you're willing to hang on, Dr. Deming, for one last one. I did just do a random selection at this point. And so we have a Time to Heal coffee mug, and we're going to give that away to Megan. Congrats, Megan. We have a Time to Heal t-shirt, and we're going to give that away to Karen. And then we also have a Visa gift card, and Diane is the lucky recipient of that. So I'll contact you guys this week to get those sent out in the mail. Again, I know we're kind of close on time. I'd love to pick your brain all morning, Dr. Deming, but let's open it up for perhaps one last question from whoever can get it in the fastest.
I have a quick question. So is a Time to Heal another version? I don't know that much about a Time to Heal. Is that another version of Above and Beyond Cancer in a different state? Or tell me us more about that.
Great question. Yeah, so we are a separate nonprofit organization, strong partners with Above and Beyond. So we are out of Omaha, Nebraska, while Above and Beyond does a lot of great things that Dr. Deming has shared today. A lot of our programming is educational. We have classes. Our main class is a 9-week survivorship class. And so it comes with a participant workbook. It's research-based, evidence-based. We talk about side effects. We talk about how cancer impacts relationships. We talk about nutrition and exercise. And then we have some other classes like a 6-week brain fog class. We do these monthly webinars. And we just have this partnership with Above and Beyond in that we offer different things and we cross-promote. And we've been on to talk about our programs with Dr. Deming and his webinar series and vice versa. So I hope that answers your question a little bit more.
Yeah. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, the Time to Heal is a wonderful organization, and they have actually more virtual programming than Above and Beyond. We started off as just an in-person thing. You had to be with us to get participate, obviously, in the physical activity, the nutrition. We've taken their lead and are developing more virtual programming, but do check out a Time to Heal website. They also have an evidence-based brain fog program that I share with my patients that people can attend virtually. So we are different locations and kind of came at survivorship slightly differently, but we are collaborating, and Time to Heal is also going to be doing some train the trainer sessions in Iowa to help expand cancer survivorship programming, especially, in rural areas where you may not live in a town where you've got enough folks to be able to come together physically in one place, in one space. So wonderful organization, and we're honored to partner with them on programming.
Thanks, Dr. Deming. And I know we didn't get to all the questions in the chat box, but I do want to be sensitive of your time and everyone else's time. And so we are going to kind of close up for today. This session's recorded. If you want to go back and listen, we'll have it on our YouTube and we'll send a link out for that. But I'm just so thankful for everybody for joining us today. I'm so thankful for you, Dr. Deming. It's always a pleasure, and enjoy the rest of your Saturday, everybody.
Yes, it's a great day to be alive. Please get outside and enjoy nature and give someone a hug.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.